In the spring of 1200 BC, a girl named Nefertari stood in the courtyard of the Temple of Amun at Karnak while priests shaved her head completely bald. She was 9 years old, brought here 3 days earlier by her father, a minor official who owed a debt he couldn't pay in silver or grain, so he paid it with his daughter. Nefertari didn't understand. Her father said it was a great honor, that she would serve the gods, that she should be grateful, obedient. As the bronze razor scraped across her scalp, removing every trace of her long black braids, Nefertari began to cry. An older priestess struck her across the face. "Servants of the god do not weep," the woman said, her voice cold. "You have no tears anymore, you have no name anymore, you belong to Amun now, and Amun does not accept weakness." This was Nefertari's introduction to a life that would last 43 years, a life of confinement, control, systematic exploitation. Hidden behind walls covered in images of divine glory, she would never leave these grounds, never marry, never own a thing, never decide anything about her own body or her own future. She would serve, silently, obediently, until she died, was buried in an unmarked grave, no family to mourn her, no name recorded for history to remember. But here's what you need to understand. Nefertari was not unusual, not an isolated case of abuse. She was one of thousands. Thousands of girls and women who spent their entire lives inside Egyptian temples, called by beautiful, sacred-sounding titles: God's wives, servants of the god, hands of the goddess, divine Adoratrices, beautiful names, for a system that destroyed lives as efficiently as any battlefield, that exploited the vulnerable as systematically as any slave market, that erased identities as completely as any conqueror erasing a city. This is the story of what Egyptian priests did to temple virgins. And this isn't mythology, this isn't fiction, this is documented in temple inscriptions, in administrative papyri, in the accounts of ancient historians who saw it. If you want to understand how religious authority can be weaponized, how sacred language can disguise systematic abuse, then listen closely. Most people hear temple virgins and picture something romantic, elegant women in white linen, performing beautiful rituals, lives of spiritual devotion, a noble calling. This image is completely wrong. It's wrong in ways that show us how powerful ancient propaganda was, how completely they hid the reality behind the sacred imagery. Let me explain what these women actually were. The Egyptian term was Henutmahat, servant of the god, sometimes wife of the god. Their virginity meant ritual purity, a state of being uncorrupted. But that purity was enforced through total physical control over their bodies, their relationships. They were kept pure for the gods, which meant one thing in practice, available for the priests who claimed to speak for those gods. Here's the crucial part: most didn't choose this. They were given. As children, some were pledges, a family's gift to the gods for favor, abandonment framed as piety, some were payment for debts, human trafficking with a religious seal of approval, and some were tribute, taken from conquered villages, from Nubia, from Libya, marched to Egypt, assigned to a temple. Never to leave, they were young. Records show girls of 8, 9, children unable to consent, unable to understand. Take Mutemuya, she was 8, from a Nubian village. After a conquest, soldiers came for tribute, gold, ivory. Children, Mutemuya was selected, bound with rope, marched hundreds of miles north. She didn't speak Egyptian, didn't know where she was going, only that she'd been torn from her mother. She cried until a guard beat her. She learned to weep silently. She arrived at Thebes, was given to the temple of Mut, goddess of motherhood. The irony of that would haunt her forever. For girls like Nefertari and Mutemuya, a process began. A process designed with psychological precision to break their will, to prepare them for a lifetime of absolute submission. First, the purification bath, taken to a stone pool, stripped, washed with natron water. But it was an inspection. Priests would touch them, examine them, telling them it was sacred. That resistance was a failure. Nefertari flinched. The priest grabbed her arm hard, told her the gods were watching, that she'd bring shame, punishment. She stood frozen, endured it, tears mixing with the pool water. Lesson 1, your body is not your own. Then the shaving, every strand of hair removed, a visible destruction of their former self. When Nefertari saw her bald reflection in a bronze mirror, she didn't recognize the child staring back. Then the renaming. Her birth name, Nefertari, was taken. Forbidden, she was renamed Nefertari. Beautiful is the lady, a reference to the goddess. Her old name was dead. The girl she had been was dead. Then came the darkest ritual of all, the divine marriage. The girl would be dressed in bridal finery, led to the inner sanctuary before the god's statue. A priest wearing the god's mask would speak. He would pronounce her the god's bride. She would repeat vows. I give myself to the god. My body is his temple. My life is his property. I belong to him now and forever. Mutemuya was 10, dressed in fine linen, led before the statue of Mu. The high priest chanted, speaking as the goddess. Mutemuya repeated the words she was told to say. I have no other lord, no other family, no other purpose but service. With those words she was bound, legally, religiously, for life. This marriage wasn't symbolic. It had real consequences. She could never marry a man, could never have legitimate children, could not own property, could not leave. She was property. And then daily life began, wake before dawn, communal sleeping quarters, no privacy, own nothing, morning purification, then labor, hours of it, weaving temple linen, grinding grain, brewing beer, gardening, all framed as sacred service. Some were singers, musicians. They practiced hymns, played the sistrum, but through it all silence, enforced silence. Unnecessary talk was punished. Nefertari had a friend, Takhait. They whispered at their looms, about memories, about home. One day an overseer heard, struck Takhait with a rod, dragged her away. Nefertari didn't see her for 3 days. When Takhait returned, she was broken, wouldn't speak, wouldn't look at anyone. 2 months later, Takhait disappeared. The overseer said she'd been found impure, returned to the gods. No one asked what that meant. They all understood the message. They were watched, constantly, movements restricted, no visitors, no contact with family. And they were inspected, regularly, so-called purity inspections. Priests would summon them, examine them, intimately, claiming it was religious necessity. Nefertari learned to leave her body during these, to let her mind go elsewhere while she was touched, invaded. Resistance meant punishment. Escape was impossible. Taken so young, they knew no other world, had no money, no skills, no family outside. The walls were in their minds, and the indoctrination was constant, taught they were blessed, chosen, that their servitude was the highest honor, that their bodies were temples for the divine, that priests spoke with the god's own voice, that the outside world was corrupt, dangerous. This was reinforced daily, through ritual repetition, until it felt like truth, but some resisted. Mutemuya at 16 secretly sang a Nubian song her mother taught her, a song about home. She was reported dragged before the high priest. He struck her to the ground. You have no mother, he hissed. No language but ours, no songs but our hymns. You are nothing. You exist only to serve. She was locked in a storage room for 7 days. When she emerged, she was broken in a new way. She never sang her songs again. But late at night, the words would come, and she would weep, mourning the loss of even her memories. Now pay close attention. This is where it gets worse. The ritual duties for women called God's wives, for those in temples of fertility goddesses. There were rituals called sacred union or divine marriage. The inscriptions use beautiful poetry. The god enters his temple. Divine seed is planted. Here's the reality. High-ranking priests would claim to embody the god. They'd wear divine costumes. In the inner sanctuary, closed to outsiders, they would tell a selected woman she was about to receive the god's blessing, that the god would enter her, that she must submit completely. And then priests, acting as vessels for divine power, would exercise what they called divine marriage rites. These were not consensual relationships. These were coerced encounters between powerful men and powerless women who had been conditioned from childhood to believe they could not refuse, who were told this was sacred. A blessing. Nefertari was selected at 14, told it was a great honor, dressed in fine garments, led to the inner sanctuary. The high priest stood before her in the mask of Amen. He told her Amen himself would bless her. Then he moved to remove her clothes. She understood, tried to back away. Priests grabbed her arms, held her still. The high priest told her she could not refuse the god. That resistance was blasphemy, that she would bring a curse. She was 14, terrified. Conditioned for 5 years to obey. Nowhere to run, no one to help. What happened next was called sacred union, divine blessing. It was recorded in temple documents as a successful ritual, but Nefertari knew even then it was not sacred. It was violation, disguised as religion, and there was no justice to seek. The men who violated her were the men who defined justice. Some women were selected repeatedly. They bore children from these unions. The children were called blessed. Marked by divine favor, destined for temple service. Daughters followed their mothers into service. Sons were trained as priests. The system reproduced itself. Nefertari had a daughter at 17. She was allowed to keep the girl for 3 years to nurse her, love her. Then the child was taken, began her training. Nefertari would see her in the corridors, was forbidden from acknowledging her. The girl was taught to call all the women mother and no one mother. Nefertari watched her daughter being broken, trained, just as she had been, and she could do nothing. For women who resisted openly, the punishments were terrifying. Purification through correction, fasting, isolation, beatings. But for the most serious offenses, trying to escape, refusing the rituals, questioning the priests, there was dedication to the desert. A woman named Henutmahat in her mid-20s finally broke. She stood during a meal and shouted to the others, "This is not holy. These men are not gods. We are prisoners. We should resist." She was seized immediately. The women were forced to watch as guards marched her out into the desert, miles from water or shelter. They watched as the guards walked away, leaving her. They watched her try to walk back as guards shot arrows at her feet. They watched her collapse in the heat, wander madly from thirst. By the next day, she was dead, her body left for scavengers. The women were marched out to see the corpse. The high priest spoke. "This is what happens to the impure, to blasphemers. Let her spirit wander forever, and let all of you remember." They were ordered never to speak her name again, but they remembered. The memory was supposed to cow them, but for some it did something else. It showed them the truth. The system was not sacred, it was exploitation. Henutmahat was a hero. So resistance went underground, hidden in glances, in songs with double meanings, in deliberate mistakes in weaving that spelled out words, "I remember," "I resist," and in their final desperate act of defiance, the hidden messages. When these women died, often in the temple after decades of service, they were erased, buried in communal unmarked pits. No ceremony, no monument. Their names were not recorded for remembrance. Their usefulness was over, but some, before they died, tried to leave a mark. In dark corners with stolen tools, they carved messages into the stone walls. Tiny, easily missed, but permanent. "I was born free. They took that. Remember, we were people. My name was Mutemuya before they changed it. That name is dead, but I write it here. I bore 4 children. All were taken. I loved them. To whoever finds this, we suffered. We did not choose this. Tell our story." Mutemuya, the Nubian girl, now a woman of 49, carved her message 2 days before she died of fever. In a dark storage room, she scratched into the wall. "I came from beyond the first cataract. My mother's name was Amenitter. She sang Nubian songs. I remember her voice, though I have not heard it in 41 years. This life was not my choice. These gods were not my gods. If anyone finds this, know that I existed. Know that I remembered. I never stopped being Mutemuya of Nubia. Even when they called me by Egyptian names, I was always myself. I never surrendered that." She died. Her message remained hidden, unknown for centuries, a whisper from the darkness saying, "I existed, I mattered, remember me." The temples still stand at Karnak at Thebes. Tourists walk through them. They admire the columns, the hieroglyphs, the statues. They hear stories of pharaohs and gods and glory, but now you know a different story. You know about the girls who were taken, the rituals that broke them, the exploitation that defined their lives, the silent resistance, the hidden messages. They were Nefertari, Mutemuya, Takhait, Henutmahat, and thousands of others whose names are lost. They were people, they suffered, they existed. And they deserve to be remembered, not as servants of the gods, but as human beings, who endured, and who, in the only ways they could, whispered back against the silence.